We are on Shabbat, Perek Vav, Mishnah Bet. We're going to continue talking about things a person shouldn't go outside with on Shabbat because of either Gzeira, as we're going to see, or it's an Isur of Hotzah, of actually carrying outside. Says the Mishnah, Lo yetze ha'ish b'sandal ha'mesumar. A person is not allowed to walk outside. A man should not walk outside. Sandal is, or sandal is a shoe, a mesumar, that was made with nails. Okay? I found a picture of an ancient Roman shoe. It looks like the sandal went all the way around, but then it had a sole that was made of wood, so then they would probably nail it in place. Now, what in the world is wrong with wearing a sole with wooden nails? This is actually the Gemara says, it's a very tragic and troubling story. So the Gemara says, Bartunur says it's made of eitz, it's made of wood. And they would hammer in nails in order to make it stronger. Chachamim Chazal prohibited men excuse me, on Shabbat and Yom Tov from wearing this kind of shoe because of a tragic story that happened. What happened? The Jews were hiding from the, I don't know who, probably Greeks or whatever, maybe the Romans, probably the Romans, because of decrees. And they were hiding in a cave. And they heard voices, they heard some noises from above the cave. They began to panic. There's a lot of people in this cave. They thought they were going to be captured. It means they pressured each other or they pushed each other. And then they ended up killing each other with the nails in their shoes. Panic, pandemonium, who can imagine? Because this story happened on Shabbat, they prohibited both on Shabbat and Yom Tov, which is a gathering day on Shabbat. It seems like from this story, it wouldn't make, how is this possible that it should be a prohibition on Shabbat? One gets the sense that it's based on commemorating what happened. It's hard to imagine the Chazal were really fearful that it would only happen on Shabbat again if you wore your nailed shoe on Shabbat. It's very difficult to know. But that tragic story is definitely part, the Gemara explains, is the reason behind the Mishnah. I mean, if we look in the Safrai, I was looking in the Safrai, and he says that the real reason for the Isur, if we look back at the shoe, that's what the Romans wore. And if Romans wore these kinds of sandals, and this Mishnah was specifically from the times after the Merid Bar Kochva, where the Romans were hunting down the Jews, and the shoes were reminiscent of the Romans. And it could be because they had the metal on the bottom. Jews didn't have them. When they walked on rocks, you could hear them, and it would be very traumatic for people. Or it was a reminder, and out of a nationalistic reason, Chazal didn't want people wearing the Roman shoes. They didn't want them to identify with them. Interestingly, these quotes Yerushalmi, and he says, so why is it only on Shabbat? Why specifically Shabbat? So he says, it's about Safrai says, that the Yerushalmi says that nobody had two pairs of shoes. So therefore, if they said you couldn't wear on Shabbat, the good shoes with the tacks on the bottom, then you wouldn't have weekday shoes otherwise, and therefore nobody would buy those Roman shoes. But he says it's much more, in the times the Gzeira is much more nationalistic than it has anything to do with Shabbat. And that's much, much more likely, it seems to me, why the Mishnah would say a person should wear sandal and misumar, rather than why would you wear it on Shabbat? What's the problem with Hotzah? Mishnah continues. V'lo b'yachid, you can't wear a single shoe for the obvious reason that you'll probably take it off. As long as the other foot, probably, it's a machloket, but as long as the other foot isn't injured, if the other foot is injured, then we'd understand why you're wearing one shoe. But if you wear one shoe, but if your other foot isn't injured, the likelihood is that a person wears one shoe and the other one, is hobbling around, he'll take off one shoe. V'lo b'tfilin, tfilin are not considered beged Shabbat. We don't wear tfilin on Shabbat. Okay. V'lo b'kamea, bizman she'eno min ha'mumche. They had kameh, their amulets, and they firmly believed in amulets, as we can see. Person got sick, he would go to the sofer, and he would say to the guy, the local rav, and he'd say, write me an amulet to make me feel better. My head hurts, my knees hurt, my whatever. And he'd write him an amulet. If he was a mumche, they believed that it was for healing, it really would heal. So the Gemara talks about what does it mean to be a mumche. So he says, a mumche is a person should repay shlosha b'nei adam. That a person who's already been proven that his amulets heal. Okay, but if you bought it from a person who's not a mumcha yet, it's considered not considered a piece of clothing, but it's considered an adornment. But this Mishnah clearly determines that if they was from a mumcha, they believed that these kameot had the power to heal. That lasted for many hundreds of years. V'lo b'shiryon. Shiryon is a helmet. Shiryon is the mail of armor that a soldier wore. V'lo b'kasta. Kasta is the helmet. V'lo magafayim, nor the boots. Can't wear either of those things. Even though you're wearing them derech malbush, you're not allowed to wear any of those things on Shabbat. They were not considered appropriate for Shabbat. Okay? Because they're military, they're armor. Therefore, Chachamim said you can't wear them on Shabbat. But if you did, enu chayav chatat. Even though it's not normally worn on Shabbat, all of these things are things that are worn, and therefore, they're all gzeirot. But if you actually wore them, you can't say they were chayav chatat. We'll stop here. This is a particularly fascinating Mishnah, both for the story of the sandal musmar and also for the kameah. Any rationalist will have problems with how did the Chazal really believe a kameah could heal, but they did. I believe that they did. We'll dedicate the learning of this Mishnah to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. If you have comments about the pictures or what have you, or any questions, email me at raspolter@gmail.com. Have a good day.